Hello everyone, my name is Hampus Alfredsson and I'm an electromobility researcher at RISE Research Institutes of Sweden, and I'm also in charge of the current strategic initiative from RISE on electric aviation. But today I'm here as a representative for NEA, the Nordic Network for Electric Aviation. And as you see, I'm unfortunately not here today due to the whole COVID-19 situation, but I'm happy to present this interesting topic to you anyway, and I hope this works for you. So, NEA is a project that started last November 2019, and it will continue until March 2022. And during this period, it is funded by Nordic Innovation, which is an agency under the Nordic Council of Ministers. And the thing is that they really want us in the Nordics to become forerunners in this field of electric aviation. So the funding from Nordic Innovation is now 4 million Norwegian crowns. But then due to the commitment from our partners, we currently have a total budget of approximately 12 million Norwegian crowns. So there are actually a lot of partners involved in this project, and from many different representations, like both airports, airlines, developers, and so on. So the idea is that this is not just going to be talk and discussions. We will make sure to use this broad collaboration to actually make an impact here. But you might ask, like, why us? Why should the Nordics be the ones that makes this happen? And my simple answer is because we are already awesome. Because we have been working for a long time with fossil-free aviation in the Nordics. If we take an example, so on the path towards sustainable aviation, you guys in Finland were actually first in the world to accept a sustainable aviation fueled plane. And this plane came from Schiphol in the Netherlands and landed here in Finland back in 2008. Then, a few years after, came Norway, where both SAS and Norwegian flew with sustainable aviation fuel the first time. And then came Sweden, who was actually the first in the world to install a tank with sustainable aviation fuel at one of our airports. So we are way ahead in sustainable aviation fuels. We have worked a lot with fossil-free aviation, but the question still remains, what about electric aviation? And if we look back just a couple of years, the discussions about flying on electricity was talked about like some kind of fairy tale, like something we should not consider now, but rather in some future world setting. But however, something happened last year where we saw that this might actually solve some of our issues and become a solution a lot sooner than we might actually think. And we saw statements like this, where Norway claimed that all their domestic flights should be electric by 2040. And now both Avinor in Norway and Finavia here in Finland have actually bought small electric trainer aircrafts like the one in the picture here for testing and learning about what this implies. And if we see in Norway, we have also Elfly AS, who have led the acquisition of 60 more electric trainer aircrafts from another developer. And in Sweden, we are currently buying these kinds of aircrafts too. So we know that we're awesome, and we know that things are starting to happen. But let us back up a bit and ask ourselves, like, why are these happenings so important? So 2050 is the year where we should be fossil free, and that's what we're all looking at right now, right? Today, the aviation industry is responsible for about 2% of the global CO2 emitted annually, and it's responsible for about 4% of the greenhouse gas effect due to those high altitude emissions that we have. And that might seem small relative to other sectors, but I think we must look ahead also, and also consider the actual role of aviation to us. So today there are around 80% of the world's population that has never set their foot inside an airplane. And that means that only 20% of us is contributing to the climate impact that we currently see. And we know that the global middle class is growing. We know that more people are moving into the cities and will get the possibility and also afford to fly. So if we continue business as usual, that emission percentage of 2 or 4% is expected to have grown threefold by 2050. And that is, of course, not in the direction that we want this to go. Also, our economy today is global. We do collaborate between different countries on the global arena, and we are dependent on the possibilities to meet, both in business to solve these large questions like the climate impact, but also in private to maintain our relationships, to explore new cultures, and so on. And flying is and will probably stay for some time the mode of transport where we can actually cover long distances in reasonable times. And further on, in countries like Finland and Sweden, a well-developed aviation infrastructure is also essential for the accessibility and establishments of new companies and so on, also in our rural areas outside the large cities. So I think it's important to at least look at the alternatives of making aviation sustainable. And for certain, the same rule goes here as for many other transport modes. We need to look at all kinds of solutions and use each of them where they make the most relevancy. So there is no silver bullet here. To some degree, we should keep improving the efficiency of today's systems and components. In fact, if we look back on the airplanes that operated like 50 or 60 years ago, today's airplanes are about 80% more fuel efficient. So a lot has happened already. And we should, of course, continue, but also we need to do more to reach our targets. The other path is, of course, sustainable aviation fuels like biofuels, where we see a lot happening on both national and global scale with new ways of producing fuels from different kinds of feedstock and so on. And we should, of course, keep pushing for this as a crucial part of the sustainable aviation development. The third path is what we're discussing here today, though, electric aviation, which is generally discussed as battery electric, but could of course also mean new solutions like hydrogen, fuel cells, and so on. And as I said earlier on, this area has actually gained a lot of interest recently, where the Nordics should become the forerunners. That's what we're pushing for. So let's ask ourselves, why is electric aviation so interesting? Well, there are three challenges for aviation today as we see it. First, we have profitability. So the airline industry is in general a very economically pressured industry, and we've seen several of them go bankrupt during recent years, like we had NextJet here in Sweden, who operated regional flights. But we've also seen the larger players like Thomas Cook go bankruptcy. The second is accessibility. So the economics of operating airlines has created a system where large international hubs are primarily the beneficial players, while the smaller airports, they struggle financially. So this has created this well-known hub systems where more and more traffic is concentrated towards the larger airports, and we use larger airplanes to spread costs over more passengers and fill the planes more and so on. So this is how it looks at a Swedish airport today, which is not somewhere like Stockholm or Gothenburg. Because if we're in Stockholm, Gothenburg, it looks like this. So there's a mismatch here where you have to go through the larger hubs almost wherever you want to end up. And we can take an example here. So even if you want to do this journey between Östersund and Umeå in the north of Sweden, you have to do this stopover in Stockholm. In fact, only 2% of the trips flown between the Nordic countries does not go through any of our capitals. The third one is climate, of course. We need to eliminate the dependency on fossil fuels to reach our climate targets, and also to prevent more natural disasters like the ones that we see today with fires, floods, and so on. So if we put all these three together, we have a sweet spot right there in the middle where our solution is. And we think that this is electric aviation. And you, of course, want to know why we think that. Well, flying fully electrified airplanes would mean zero operational emissions of greenhouse gases. Then the total emissions will of course depend on what electricity mix that is used, but the operational emissions would at least be zero. And in fact, we think that electric airplanes would have the lowest carbon footprint of all regional transports, including cars, buses, and trains. And it's scalable. We see new ways of thinking about airplane design and airframes becoming possible as electric motors are highly efficient and its power to weight ratio is not affected when scaled down to smaller sizes and so on, which is definitely the case for conventional jet engines. So last year, the International Council on Clean Transportation, the ICCT, they released a paper about emissions from commercial aviation. So in this figure from that paper, we have flight distance on the x-axis and percentage of total CO2 emissions on the left y-axis. And then on the right y-axis, we have carbon intensity. So first, we can see that the carbon intensity is higher for short flights. And if we look at these four first bars from flights between 0 and up to 2,000 kilometers and sum them up, we can calculate that they are responsible for about 40% of the total emissions from commercial aviation. And that is actually in the range where we think that electric aviation will be feasible in the near future. What more, the fuel cost is much lower, somewhere between 50 to 90%, depending on the electricity production mix and so on. And similar to electric cars, the maintenance cost is also lower, about 50% due to much less moving parts. Basically, in an electric airplane, you would have one moving part, which is the electric motor. And this means that we can fly a 19-seater fully electric aircraft at an equivalent cost per passenger as for a 76-seater aircraft. Also, an electric airplane would mean less noise, about 50% lower than its conventional counterparts. So we could, for example, utilize city-close airports in other ways that we do than that we do today. It also requires shorter runways, which is positive for us in the Nordics, where we have a lot of shorter runways. And altogether, we could be looking at a new kind of aviation industry and where we suddenly find profitability in the short-haul routes. So now to the actual airplanes. This is the Pipistrel Alpha Electro that you see in the picture. It's what we refer to as the first generation of electric aircraft. And it's available on the market today. For example, it's what you here in Finland have bought recently. So it's a two-seater aircraft made for training purposes, and it will run for about 1 hour. And this is from May last year, where when we borrowed one of those Pipistrel Alpha Electro to Gothenburg for a short test flight. So this is Gothenburg that you see here, and there is no sound on this video, so you do not need to fear that. So in December last year, we also saw what we choose to call the second generation of electric aviation, where Harbour Air in Canada and a propulsion system from the company Magnix took a 60 to 70-year-old model of the Beaver airplane and retrofitted this with an electric motor. So this is from their first test flight last year in Canada. And this airplane is closer to what we know as a regular airplane, which can also hold more passengers and cargo. And there's no sound in this video either. Now, what we aim for is the third generation of electric airplanes. It's a larger and still quite conventional design, but it's designed from scratch to be fully electric. Compare these three generations, this last one actually has a lot smaller and less powerful electric motors than the second generation, but it will have more of them distributed over the wings to still enable operations efficiently. The airplane currently under development in Sweden is this one, the Heart ES-19 from Heart Aerospace. So this one is designed for 19 passengers. It will have a range of approximately 400 kilometers. Heart will have a flying prototype ready in 2022, and further the electric airplane will be fully certified for commercial operations by 2025. And they are actually before schedule in the certification process right now, so it all seems really positive actually. So the Nordic Network for Electric Aviation has 4 objectives that will make electric aviation happen on a broad scale. First, we will look at standards for electric aircraft and airport infrastructure. Second, we are going to work with business models for regional point-to-point travel between our Nordic countries, because we believe that electric aviation will create a whole new way of thinking about aviation in general, with new business models for direct flights between A and B, instead of running all transports via our capitals and larger cities. Thirdly, we will look at weatherproofing. So if we can develop electric aircrafts for the climate that we have in the Nordics, We believe that it will be able to fly anywhere. And last, of course, we should collaborate also outside the Nordics to export what we learn here, but also learn from the rest of the world. And this is, believe it or not, one of our goal pictures. So back in the days, the Nordics gathered and set the standards for the telecom industry with NMT and GSM, which later became worldwide standards. So we've done this before, and we are good at working together. So just like people in developing countries made a technological leap directly to mobile phones, we want them to also jump straight to electric aviation or sustainable aviation fuels instead of doing our aviation journey and our steps with fossil fuels.
Icelandair is taking part in this project because it's part of the strategy of the company to be sustainable and be prepared for the future. And hopefully Icelandair can contribute into the work, both with its operational expertise and technical expertise and the knowledge of the business models that could drive the change.
We do have the stakeholders that will make this happen. We have the airports, we have the airlines, so it's not that we are just sitting around discussing, because this is the input that they need to move on and actually do the implementation of the electric aviation.
Based on information we have from the aircraft producers, we think that the first electric or electrified aircraft could be in traffic in around 2025. They will be small and they will have limited range, but they could be perfect for many of the really short routes in Norway. My expectations to the Nordic Network for Electric Aviation is that we could perhaps be an interesting testing spot. There's a lot of talk about collaboration and cooperation in the aviation sector, so if we could contribute to that, that's definitely an interesting place to be.
If we can show that this can be done in the Nordics, then that could be exported to other parts of the world, and maybe they can then do a leap and they don't have maybe to take all the steps towards a more zero carbon aviation.
The changes I've seen for the last 20 years is the climate impact. We can see it directly in Greenland, flying on top of the ice cap. We see the melting of the ice cap. We see the glaciers withdrawing, getting smaller. So that's the big changes we have seen. And this is just for the last 15, 20 years. So just in short words, we are waiting for an electric aircraft, CS23 certified, painted red, and then we are ready to go.
Yes, so thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation even though I was not here in person. And just let me know if you have any questions or if you are interested to discuss this further. You have my email address here in the footer. So now let's start working together in the Nordics to actually make this happen. And remember, we are already awesome. Bye.